Hey Margaret, we're gonna get started. Pardon me.
Sorry, can everyone hear us? Drew and Ann, can you confirm you can hear us on the Teams app through the mic, the owl? Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, Ann, did you ever have any?
I think she was just doing that to let you know she could hear you.
Okay, great. I'm sharing this. So, welcome to the Ordinance Review Committee meeting. I believe, Julie County stated that she's also gonna be able to make it in person, so, I'll go ahead and call the roll for now, and then if we have an extra attendee, I'll make that of that, but, Bernie Garitas,
Present?
or Clemens here, China and Novanda.
Here.
Okay, so we have 3 out of the 4 ORC members and a quorum. So for today's agenda, the main item for discussion is, it's part of a CDO work session, so we've been receiving feedback on the draft CDO zoning map. And so there is, been submittals that we'd like the ordinance review committee to first review, and then once they make their recommendation, it would go to the plan commission, and then beyond that, staff can be advised to make changes to the CDO zoning map. And then ultimately it'd be a decision by the county commissioners if, you know, each one of these parcels, how it gets zoned. So is there any questions before I get started about today's agenda?
I have a general comment, and that was just from rewatching the admin meeting, and I know that this body made recommendations. I know we had the discussion that we typically don't, but I thought it would have been helpful to mention that you did take votes and they were approved by the majority, but I had recused myself. So out of the 4-member board, 1 was absent, 1 recused himself, and then the others had voted to send positive recommendations or their recommendations. And I thought that would be helpful for the full plan commission to understand that. And that wasn't brought up at the admin meeting, so that's just a general comment.
Okay. For future. And then, typically for this meeting, I know there's some other meeting conflicts, so we try to respect everyone's time.
They canceled the city plan commission meeting.
Okay, we'll still shoot for kind of the 5:30.
I was hoping it would be less than an hour and a half.
Yeah, and then the other business brought before the committee, if there is time at the end, I have just one discussion topic from the health department in regards to subdivisions and septic permits that if I can introduce it, I'll just mention it, but if we don't have time, I will follow up with a later meeting. Okay, so this is the information for today's discussion. These parcels were submitted to us by the redevelopment commission. And I provided some context about when we met with the redevelopment commission and how that came to be. And so I provided a table similar to last time that is inclusive of all the parcels. And I think it's most helpful to review some of the maps first. So I was thinking we could start with the area on Angelina first, since that's only 2 parcels, and then we could make our way to the other area, which is much larger area. So the first area that there was comment about was in regards to the North Angelina Lane parcels here. These were zoned ag rural reserve, currently zoned ag rural reserve, and business industrial overlay. So right now in the draft zoning map, these areas are to be zoned ag 2.5 or agricultural 2.5. because we're getting rid of the business industrial overlay. So this is part of the comprehensive plan employment area. And there are, some site conditions here. We know this area does have forest features in it, but it also has accessibility to, larger thoroughfare roadways, railroads, etc. And then here's a buildable area map of this area, as well as the drainage area that we've been including as of late, so it's part of the Jackson Creek drainage area. So the letter from the redevelopment commission states that they would be interested in designating this area for employment. I believe the comment was that they would like to see it as light industrial. So, are there any questions or comments on this one?
Just clarification, the blue, the light blue is,
This is light industrial. This is the 802 table, light industrial. This is the 833 limited industrial, essentially the same zone, two different chapters that's being administered, and that's part of the CDO as we're going to be hopefully cleaning that up, making it all one type.
that's a great idea. The redevelopment commission back about 15 years ago, Julie could probably correct me on that. Whenever they did Angelina, they invested all kinds of money in the roadway and the storm sewer, on the sanitary sewer. There was a lift station along that north side, and they've even included commercial sized roadway stubs to the east. And then they've got a
I
cul-de-sac to them.
can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry, because.
I'm sorry, yeah, back probably 15 years ago, the redevelopment commission actually invested in Angelina Drive. And they constructed that. There's a sanitary sewer force main that goes to the north end of that road. Storm sewer, there's commercial drive-in entrances going to the east. And then, of course, you got print pack and then the industrial site where Jackie's cursor is. So I think it's a great idea.
The areas they're interested are the ones that are outlined in blue?
Yes.
Okay. Have we, anybody talked to the homeowners in that area, those little lots there?
Mr. Axel and Mr. Spicer and,
Spoken with Mr. Spicer.
yes.
And I've mentioned before, I think Margaret, you were involved in that meeting where I said that the redevelopment commission in particular is interested in seeing this zoned industrial, and, there was some discussion after that. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
So they're probably gonna say, no, we'd like it at 2.5. Okay, okay.
I have a question, and I guess it's more of a history lesson for me, is seeing it surrounded by light industry, and even that's to the west, and then to the east, we have more industry use. Why was this left out and stayed as ag? And is there like future or a historic discussion of why this is
Right, why it wasn't.
designated as ag? Yeah,
So,
not
yeah.
just from property owners but
right,
from more of a plan commission discussion.
right. So, based on my research, when I met with, I believe it was Mr. Spicer, that I wanted to double check this information, but this subdivision right here, Northwest Park,
Uh-huh.
was brought by one developer at one time, and then they made that decision to create that subdivision, create that zoning, and then it was at a later meeting where it was discussed, well, this area across the way should be kind of a holding pattern, so that's when the BIO rezone was later put to these lots. So these lots are not, this area is not part of the Northwest Park.
Right.
Right.
But these areas are. So this spot in particular, and Bernie probably has some good information from when the railroad went through this
Yeah.
area as well. Probably more information than I would have on it, but I do know that this area, the farmland, was not part of the original light industrial subdivision that was happening to the
Yeah.
south. And then these kind of happened more piecemeal over time after Northwest Park has been put in, but, this area is in the comprehensive plan as Employment, I will say that when we were doing the consolidation of zones under the draft zoning map, we did take into account what things are currently zoned as, what things are currently used as well. So I do think it's a good discussion to have at the plan commission level, at the commissioners level, because you have sort of this balancing act of what's the property used as agricultural, what is it currently zoned as agricultural, but there's this business industrial overlay that we're planning on getting rid of. How are we addressing that? If we are getting rid of that, should it basically go into the light industrial category or stay as is, and then we'll see a rezone at a later time. So I think that's why it was picked up in the comprehensive plan as employment area, is because of that BIO. So it is on that tipping edge of how you all would like to see it be zoned.
I was wondering, was there any discussions as far as like from drainage, board, about, you know, karst features, or now that we have like a stormwater program, like what are their thoughts? Because, you know, we do have some pretty vulnerable land there. I mean, it draws my attention because it does look somewhat piecemealed, and it's not contiguous kind of zoning, but also, you know, the concerns with what looked like you had wetland delineation going on and some other things. Like, do we understand what their thoughts are on this topic or discussion?
I can answer that a little bit more broadly. When I brought this discussion to the drainage board at some point in time, I said, is there a possibility that any particular property just should not be zoned industrial if within a critical drainage area? And their answer was more, we would be more concerned with the impervious cover and possibly some uses within that list than the actual particular zoning of the property. So if you have a really small pervious cover within the critical drainage area, that, and maybe some reduction of uses that could have off-site impacts to stormwater, then I think that they were necessarily stating that like none of this area could be zoned industrial. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does, but I guess what I'm really curious is, if we ask maybe, Kelsey Patonia or someone with our stormwater program of what their thoughts are here.
On this particular.
Yeah, and, this is gonna move forward regardless of what position we take, right? Or if we say, hey, leave it alone, that doesn't move outside of the ORC, or does this go to the full plan commission regardless as like a
The way
procedure
we have
question?
it is just to take that full
Okay, I
recommendation.
thought so.
to the board.
So that gives you a little time to maybe ask about this particular parcel. And then my other question is, how dense could this be as is if people wanted to carve it out?
Under Act 2.5, I could pull it out.
Because I think we always forget about the underlining zoning and what you can already do when we get into the idea of what could happen when it rezones.
But it worries me to hear that if there are issues with vulnerable features, less pervious surfaces required, then how is that, that's not anywhere in our ordinance to cover that. I mean, you know what I'm saying, it would just be LI, and they find all these difficulties. This is, like, everybody that's in ag tells me this is prime agricultural land in Monroe County.
Okay.
This is where it is. That stretch west of Curry.
And I also am looking at the, you know, the trees and the valuable, there's a high concentration of trees and the heavy lifting they're doing for all of our community, both in terms of stormwater and in terms of cleaning, the carbon from our environment. If that is turned into, you know, just an industrial scape, then we lose those trees.
But we
And
might lose them if they develop it into, you know, parcels and subdivide it too, because it's a pretty large lot, so.
or if it stays ag.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, you know, I'm kind of looking at it from both angles. I don't have a particular position. I'm trying to understand the history of this right now,
Yeah.
and kind of think it through.
So you're looking at, about 120, 130 acres. And with sewer, they could subdivide that. up to 2.5 acre lot sizes.
And already had a
So-
sewer, right?
Well, that was one question I was gonna ask. Just because it's adjacent to sewer, does that mean that the city of Bloomington is gonna serve it?
Not
I
right
mean-
now, we don't know. We don't
Right,
know.
well, that's
They
the
weren't.
question.
They don't have to-
That's the question.
Yeah.
So one point that might,
What was the rough math on that, Jackie?
So when I did, 130 acres times 0.8, because we usually take out 20% for utilities, divided by 2.5, it was about 41 lots.
So it could be 41.
As like a maximum.
If it changes from ag, you know.
Well, that's just real rough numbers, but it gives you a perspective.
I do want to point out just quickly, the LI, the 2-pager, we are proposing a maximum impervious cover for within the watershed, so something to think about as we kind of connect those dots between drainage board concerns, and I plan on bringing this back to the drainage board as well. It's just generally speaking, in the zones where there is a critical drainage area, if we want to limit the impervious cover.
CDO, right?
Yes.
I just have a general thought about, and question kind of, I guess. You know, in the areas that are currently deemed light industrial there, how much of the land is used for light industrial? What percentage of it is used for LI? Is it 100% at capacity? Is it 80% at capacity?
Your question is how much LI zone property is vacant?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
great question.
Hold on one second.
Still a little ambiguous, right? Because you have large parcels that could be subdivided potentially, so, but it's a great question.
Yeah, it's just, so, you know, there's so many different issues at play, and when I think about the extension of the sewer services out into this area, of course, there was the economic drive for, industry, which some of it arrived, some of it did not. And also there was a need for environmental remediation because the PCBs were leaching into the sinkholes, which was inquinating our water supply and our drinking water supply. So that the sewer extension and the water extension exists out there and the investment was made. I don't know how much of it is remediation or how much of it is an investment, you know, for
the industrial.
or not just for the industrial, but for the environmental harm that it.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I would suggest that the water expansion was probably had a lot to do with that.
that's what I think.
Because there's so many different independent water corporations within
Yeah.
Monroe County.
Yes,
So they probably fingered those out and tried to get them, I don't know how they're distributed. I mean, there are properties over on that road that are mixed, the single properties have mixed jurisdiction
Yeah.
right.
and overlap, so,
With this, you think this would be the Richland East?
I think so. But
no,
it's not Highland Village or Van Buren.
No.
I think the city of Bloomington Utilities probably handles all of this.
Well, all of the small water corporations buy water from the city of Bloomington.
Yeah, but
And the lines are owned by small water corporations. And the members who belong to them, those small water
yeah,
corporations.
that would have to be investigated. I think that you're right, the water is purchased from the city of Bloomington, but
Right.
for some reason, I'm thinking this is city of Bloomington.
This is their own.
I think it may be because of Northwest Park. And,
Huh.
I'm just thinking the plan approvals that I've done seem like they went through city of Bloomington, but that's a question for staff.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to that question at a later date, because I only have a picture of the vacant properties in the county, what percent is LI, and that's not a reflection of the LI properties, how much are vacant, so I need to rework that data.
Okay.
I'll come back to you. Bernie?
Just a couple of questions. One, and we don't need to go through it now, I don't think, but it'll be interesting to see what type of uses we've got in the RE 2.5, because that's one of the slippery slopes we fall down. We think agri-reserve or an agricultural based land use doesn't have high intensity uses associated with it, whereas we all know they do, right?
They
So,
could, yeah.
so that would be a point that we would need to look at. It may not be as painful for someone who doesn't want to see LI moved into there to what could be used at RE 2.5. And then the other thing is we gotta remember too, I think, that the drainage board, since this is a critical watershed, the drainage board's already got a tremendously restrictive overlay on this already, with what they've got to do with stormwater detention or retention and stormwater quality basins and whatever else they need to put in. I don't think the landscape ordinance is beefed up any, which, you know.
We do have
see
some of the most restrictive, like strenuous drainage release rates in the state.
Yeah,
For
I
our
think-
critical drainage.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that you gotta detain it for 48 hours in a 2-year post.
I'm just
So-
reconciling that with Fieldstone and how that didn't happen.
Right.
Well, but I think that those came in, I think, one, we've got the lake, the detention pond that's supposed to mitigate, and then the valve is supposed to be open and closed regularly. Well, I don't think that necessarily happens, but I think the critical watershed regulations may have come in, for instance, from Cave Creek is what you're talking about, may have come in after the fact.
It was, and.
It may have
yeah,
come in after
Fieldstone was designed by this.
We actually designed Fieldstone at 1 unit per acre. It was turned down years ago, 1998. It was designed
It
at
was
1 acre lot
part of the
sizes.
city zoning, though.
It was part of
Yeah.
the city, yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So anyway, but I think the critical watershed ordinance came in.
Yeah, it was after.
So anyway,
Do we have, well, okay, that's a separate question and another time.
and then real quick, Jackie, I'm sorry. So I'll just call it Frito-Lay. So as you're coming around Vernal Pike and you tie in, is that drive there that goes to the north? Is that stub in? Is that a public right of way? And I should know that, but I can't remember.
You're talking about here?
Yes.
That's a shared
This
driveway.
is the shared driveway for this development, so they couldn't just come off.
That's not a public roadway. Okay.
Could you zoom out just a little bit more so I can see the business over there? So it's just right there is, so. I guess. Previous plan commissions were always encouraging this for a business overlay.
I think that.
When was that adopted, the business overlay? Didn't know that.
It's the last,
Yeah, in the last iteration in 97, I believe is when it was created. I could be wrong, Tom, but I don't know if these were rezoned out of the VIO after they were zoned LI.
yeah,
I'd have to look at
Yeah.
that. Because we've had several outzone, like rezones to no longer include VIO in this
Yeah.
area.
and VIO is just such a strange.
It was,
It's a-
I still scratch
I
my head
mean,
on that one.
we had that one section, south I-60, what became I-69, because we thought there's gonna be an exit, and then there wasn't. It's a whole bunch of farms and stuff, and, you know, it's just, very difficult to plan that. I
Kind
think,
of kick the can down the
Yeah.
road in a
Yeah.
way,
yeah,
Kind of was.
We haven't really seen it come to fruition. What we have seen is some property zone VIO that want to do residential subdivisions have been caught with the restrictions on it. Difficult to do the subdivision, so.
So one other comment on that would be is if you're on the railroad tracks, this is the Bloomington Industrial Spur. And the Bloomington Industrial Spur, as I think you know.
Yep.
When that was constructed back in 2005,
it was early
or was it
2000s,
before then?
yeah.
Anyway, it was, it's funny the number of trucks. When Mr. Hoback first started the Indiana Railroad, somebody asked him what he did for a living.
Yeah.
And he said he took 800,000 trucks off the roads each year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
That was why the county supported that Bloomington Industrial Spur so highly, because the number of carloads that come out of Rogers Group for
Yeah.
right? But the one thing that you can see, and you don't necessarily see it coming north on Angelina Drive, because there's about a 30-foot fill for the railroad grade there. But as you go back further to the east, there is access for a rail spur
Yeah.
that could come off the Bloomington Industrial Spur over here. And then there's also, we've got a railroad that Print Pack was designed to be able to accommodate a rail spur. And
But they don't use it.
in some fashion, well, it's such a big investment. It doesn't mean it wouldn't happen. It's kind of like, Phoenix,
Yeah.
right? I mean, now they're coming in and they've got all kinds of carloads coming in and out of there. And the
Yeah.
number of trucks that's taking off of Curry Pike
Yeah.
is tremendous.
Yeah.
So that's just another resource. That's not just because I work for the Indiana Railroad. It's because I just know what's going on there.
And then that spur kind of slides back toward, Curry, where it crosses.
Yeah, to the east.
Vernal, yeah.
Mhm.
It's not marked on there.
So anyway, but there could be connection to railroad there. And if you look up to the north, you see that narrow red strip, those two red lines,
Mhm.
that actually goes up to Ellisville. I think that's the old Monarch.
Yeah,
That
that's
used to
actually
be-
not-
because that's where the trails are.
Yeah.
So anyway. But this would be usable, I think, for railroad as well, which is a goal, I think, of comprehensive
I
plan.
mean, if you think of the trail, it could be a way to commute, and, encourage multi-mobile transportation to and from
Put the
work.
tracks down and had a commuter line. We could have,
No, I'm just saying, this is an interesting area.
yeah. But there are a lot of homeowners in the area too, on Park Street.
So on this one, before we move on to the next one, you feel like you would like to make a recommendation at this meeting, so these are the top two rows of data here.
And so far, planning is recommending,
So we have it proposed zone as ag 2.5. That's taking into consideration the current zoning and what it's currently used as. I will say that because the comprehensive plan has this in deployment, if the planning commission and the commissioners choose to keep it at 2.5, I think it will go on to that list of properties that aren't fully aligned with the comprehensive plan. And so if there's an amendment at the end to say, we understand, and recognize these properties do not follow the comprehensive plan, we'd like to, amend the comprehensive plan to match what we want to zone these as, that would be the process.
and you're saying the light industry doesn't go with the comprehensive?
Comp plan would support light
Right,
industry.
okay, so it would, that's what I thought I was hearing. I just wanted to make sure.
Define a plan.
Yeah.
Right, because it could be agricultural employment. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like, from my observation, is that they were looking in the past to have this as some type of business use area, but I think some of my concerns are more from kind of a stormwater drainage thing, but,
I would say, I agree with leaving it the same with what staff recommends. With the note that we need to hear from Kelsey and we need to know how much LI is payable.
And in addition,
Because we can always change our mind.
I'd also like to just add one prognostication. With the higher paying jobs that are gonna come in with the semiconducting printing, then this would be 2.5 for potential homes that would fit the need for the people who might be working and getting salaries that could support home building in a neighborhood close to their work, so I think that there's a lot we don't know yet, and before we allow, for.
And I think your question about what we're not using in the LI probably would be good.
Right.
For what we're not using in the ag, either 2.5 or agro third, whatever, I guess that's what it's gonna be. We should investigate that too.
Yeah,
Right.
it's an interesting concept for a healthy life to work balance location that we, as planners, we could really create something cool.
Well, and I can help you argue that point too, because you've got good transportation location, YMCA, which is nearby,
Yeah,
and you do have a hub of other industries, so.
that's right.
So that could be possible, but the question is one, is sewer available now? And with the capacity of that existing sewer main support that? I mean, it does go on 25. So it could support it, but if a plan commission's not going, or the commissioners aren't going to support some sort of subdivision development there, then that's a new argument.
Oh, you just don't know because there's no proposals been made,
Right.
we don't really know how many jobs are gonna be created, there's no guarantee on that.
Right. I guess I have one final question, and it's more looking at the entire draft zoning map, and how many spaces are we creating for any commercial use? Like across the board, but more like alive if you want to focus it, because I feel like from my observation, we're only adding very, very limited expansion of any of these zones across the board. And that's basically where I think I'm gonna find my footing. And if we're just not allowing any growth, then I'll probably go with, the evidence that we introduce and the comprehensive plan that we use as a guide to, and then kind of determine my position on that, because I think there's a fair argument on each side of, vacant land in the LI, but vacant land in the agriculture or the 2.5, I think those are all fair questions to ask and get data from. But, if we look at the percentage that's zoned one way and what's vacant, on all sides of the, of this discussion, it would be very interesting. But my real question is how much are we actually even adding to light industry on this new draft zoning map?
We can't
In general.
really even think about that until the
Well,
annexation.
that's actually quantifiable data because we have a draft map. So that's like something we can actually really have a sound answer. It's not kind of ambiguous, like
Wait for-
what's going to happen with future developments. We have a draft map that has it, so we can actually compare it from what we have now into what we're, proposing. So I would really like that data.
So Julie, were you saying that you think it should stay RE 2.5, or you, based
Yeah,
on
but
what
we wanna
staff
hear,
existed?
we wanna hear.
Yeah, okay.
Cause they can always bring a rezone request, anybody can bring a rezone, and it's, all of these are just what we
Right.
think should go there, and somebody's gonna come up with something different, and they're gonna make a rezone request in the future, and that's how planning works.
Yeah,
The
never gonna
predictability
be-
is a huge component, and, I think you're absolutely right, but without predictability, we're just kind of having a lot of people with assumptions and hopes, and I'd rather give them reassurance.
yeah, somebody who wants to
To
make
someone that
that,
wants to do a right to build.
or somebody who wants to make that kind of investment in our community is not gonna be looking at right to build, they're gonna be looking at what can they work out.
Where are the vacant lands, where are they at,
And what can we
where do I
do?
want it?
Yeah, they're not gonna be, it's all gonna be custom if you're looking at that
They're
level.
gonna look at zoning.
Well,
mean,
they'll
that's the
they'll
primary
look at
thing.
vacant lands.
That's
They'll
the
look at-
primary thing you're gonna look at, is zoning and infrastructure in the area. Those are the two primary things.
They'll
you're
look
gonna
at that, and then they'll look at what's not there, and then they're gonna come talk to the commissioners. And the economic development and the legal, and then they'll
Well,
work it
the
out.
process is planning, then commissioners.
Do we wanna vote? Do we
I
wanna
mean,
vote on
that's how
this
it
one,
should,
or do
I
you
mean,
guys wanna have
that's
a
what this
discussion?
body is for.
And for something at that level.
Or do you want me to bring back that
I mean,
information for the?
Yeah, if you have to go through
What
some
did you-
variance process or some rezone process, of course, they're gonna try to get a feel for the room. That's my whole point.
They may want
If
to
there's
say-
more of a predictability and a right to build, then we have no idea what a developer's gonna do. And from some of what my observation has been over the last several years is there's an uncertainty and a huge uncertainty. And we need to do a better job of closing that gap so we can maybe attract more folks that want to invest in this community. And, that's an opinion, but at the same time, I bet I could quantify some information to show that it's more spot on.
And what was your question, Jackie?
I want to know if people felt comfortable enough to vote on this, to have this discussion then at the planning commission, or do you want this to come back to the ORC for these two properties?
I still don't have a great position to offer here, like I said.
I would like that information before you vote. Okay. Are we ready to move on to the other
Yes,
section?
please.
Okay. So the next area is off of Arlington Road. This, very hard to illustrate all the different things in these maps. So this is the current zoning. The red dotted area is the different parcels of interest. This is the this is the CDO draft zone. And then I made the tip areas outlined in black and have a little bit of a gray gray color because it was really hard to see. So this is the tip district in this area. So they've made the recommended areas for change contiguous with that tip district, either on the east side or the west side. So these areas here, as well as these areas here, there's a discussion, I think at one of the planning commission meetings way back, about a residential TIF area. And so I believe this letter is in line with that discussion. So it states that the redevelopment commission has been working to identify a possible residential TIF district area that will likely need to include those properties to be economically viable. The focus of our residential TIF is to address rather high cost of housing in Monroe County. We believe that the properties we identified below can be zoned consistent with adjoining properties that are zoned suburban density and medium density, which can further our objective for creating a residential TIF. So right now they're zoned Ag 2.5. There is suburban density, which is a 1 acre lot size, and then medium density is more like a 0.21 acre lot size.
Yeah.
So, this, I don't believe that there's been a, maybe there has been discussion with these property owners, but for the most part, this request is
So
coming from the redevelopment.
It's not a tip for industrial, it is a tip for residential.
That would
I
be,
think
the-
it might be the second mistake.
But I'm still not personally sold that residential tips do anything but benefit developers at this point. So, and nobody's yet been able to convince me otherwise, because the money goes to the developer and they pocket it, and then the second generation homeowner sells at market value, and who's made the money? Typically the developer.
So on the time the RDC focuses on this, it's absent of, I guess, more involvement from the commissioner's office, because I felt like they spent a lot of time on this because they've already had your support. Because I watched our RDCs, I watched all of it, and they've been talking about this residential
I
tip
know they
for some
have.
time.
And they haven't come before us yet,
Oh, wow.
so.
Have they still been having the discussions on their
Every now
residential
and
tip?
then, and they removed a lot of the guardrails.
Cause I
too.
went a couple meetings when they first started talking about it, but I don't
It's-
keep my ear to the ground on that stuff anyways.
It's still, I still don't see how homeowners benefit yet.
No,
I don't see anything where it says the prices for homes are gonna be lower and stay lower. I think they might be lower for the first generation, but maybe not.
If we
Second
have no say.
generation, they're gonna sell at market value,
I
and
agree with
you've not
you.
helped anybody.
Could
No,
you give
we
us a
can't.
rough outlining of what is
No,
being
you harm
proposed
the
as a
taxpayer.
residential
Yeah,
tip on
right,
Elevate?
right, because it's a tip.
Yeah,
Just maybe for Bernie and Margaret's sake, and
What's your question again, Colin?
just a rough outline of the residential tip that they're proposing.
well, and I will mention, so this is a discussion about the draft CEO map, so I think that even if there is a discussion on a residential tip, that would be a subsequent
Yeah, it's not very.
request.
That's
So
fine.
it's two things, but
I'm
I've
fine with
put them
paring them down.
together
They're tough to
as
pare
justification.
down, yeah.
But this is the area that they're looking at to be rezoned higher density. I think even aside from the discussion of residential tip, just in general, it is a good question about where we see our transition areas and where we're expecting to see residential
Mhm.
density.
Mhm.
You know, the buffering between Ellisville and Bloomington is shoring up, so, I think it's just looking at this for what it is. If there was a discussion about higher density zoning in this area and whether it's appropriate.
And its staff says, yes, higher.
So staff, actually, so this area in the comprehensive plan is very interesting. So it's conservation residential, and then there's some suburban density.
Right,
Um,
already existing.
existing, there was a recent rezone of these parcels here for general business, so you do have.
I know what we do, Ellisville's just gonna take it anyway. so
I know,
it
I
doesn't
know,
really matter.
I know,
Honestly,
I know. I agree.
General business, and then
And
you
it
have
makes
some
sense,
far,
makes sense.
Yeah.
They do.
and then
But they want
quite a
to
bit of
fully
density
do it.
residential here. So
yeah,
So the comprehensive plan is a little bit tricky in this area, with it being conservation area.
Yeah.
So staff actually has this as Ag 2.5, so this is
Oh.
what is in the draft zoning right
Yeah.
now. For a lot of these, this actually ended up being a down zone, so under the comprehensive plan, it's not like a one-for-one conservation residential becomes Ag 2.5 in every scenario. I would say the conversion is just
Yeah.
looking at rural transition, conservation residential. I think the plan commission could decide easily to say, you know, this was estate density, one of the newer zones that we're drafting. And whether that's in line with the language of the conservation residential, I think it still would support that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it supports high density residential by any stretch, but it could be something where it's somewhere between like medium, low density up until,
What are those lots to the north? What are those neighborhoods to the north? Those are acre? Are those left?
no,
these are
Those are
less.
little subdivisions.
These are-
Oh,
This is 0.21 acre minimum lot size.
Okay, I'm too far north. Never
do,
mind.
do we know why that there's that gap there? If you look at your map,
Mhm.
off of Amherst and Ellsworth and all that, see that? Yes, so that's a lot there, right there.
This one?
Nope, across the street, there you go. That's, okay, that's why that's not there. See, yeah, I think there is some, there is some issue with,
I've been there.
yeah. Trying to remember what it was in this area that we had. Was it related to Jack's defeat? Was it related to stormwater and drainage? Was it related to?
There's a town, a big transmission line.
There's a huge transmission line there, right? Runs along, yeah. There was something else there, but, okay.
I think they showed proposes of expanding the TIF area and they might have incorporated that on a couple of their draft maps. I don't know exactly where they settled though. I don't know if that might be it.
That would have to be a residential.
You guys split the lot sizes. of-
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
small
thank
ones
you.
there, right? Yeah, these are all
So 0.981.
Acre, okay, that's what I was thinking. an acre.
0.7,
That-
0.6.
That's what I thought. And those are all serviced with sewer?
Richland,
Yeah, but it's not septic.
right, Richland.
So those two meadows, I mean, those are buildable with some sort of density. And just from the way it sits, those meadows, you could put in a density of 1 unit per acre there. You know, my thought is, if I don't know what I think of a residential TIF either, to be honest with you. I don't know that I understand it well enough to.
Sounds great at first, but.
But if we're looking at, the one thing that as a county, we should look at is, and there's all kinds of numbers out there, but if we're looking at the affordability of homes and lots, the one thing that you can do is see what the supply is, and that will be something that will help with the cost, right? So I'll just leave it at that without getting into one of my discussions on it.
Is
but-
that part of? I'm looking at my map. I feel like there's. This isn't any part of Maple Grove that has historic homes on it, is it? On the right there?
There's one-
You can correct me if I'm wrong. There is a historic district.
Yeah.
Maple Grove
Yeah.
Historic District.
So we'd have to carve out for that anyway. I mean, not a great deal, but you know what I'm saying, like you don't wanna put
Would be
a
correct,
subdivision right behind a historic farmhouse. Kind of silly,
right?
but yeah,
Be
okay,
complimentary design.
yeah, it would have to, there'd have to be a gap there for that historic district.
Well, ironically, those developers to the north did that. I think those homes they're a compliment to a lot of that area too.
So, I'm getting calls from people who, professionals who'd like to move here and do, remote jobs and, they have high incomes, but they're looking for 8 acres. They're looking for 8 acres and they want to build. And
Oh, so they're looking for vacant lot, they're not looking for a subdivision where a lot else is like. the same.
no, but I look at the way we're carving things up and it's like not attractive to them, to the clientele that bring in the, hefty paying jobs.
Well, there's a lot of 8 acre lots out there. There are a lot of parcels out there.
Yeah, we're talking about a major, not major corridor, but just people going from the town to the county that I bet they want 8 acres. They want to be a little further away from the traffic, but I agree that
I mean, it's a growing sector
it's a good.
that
So
we
is-
could take advantage of.
RDC, do they want to see that at a higher density? More like the conservation residential?
They were staying in between medium density and suburban density.
Okay, which are what home site lot sizes? Jackie, help me with that.
Sure, yeah,
That's
so
right. That
was my
0.21
question, Bernie.
acre
Took my
to
thunder.
1 acre.
Yeah.
0.21 acre lot size up to 1 acre lot size. And then we just, before, we haven't added any zones to this effect, but we also have the LD, which would be 0.34 acres, which is not in this area. Oh, yes, it is right there. So I stand corrected. 0.34 acres, and then, estate density, which would be 0.67. So to give you a round look between what they're asking for, MD to SD, there would be 4 possible zones. So MD, 0.21 acre, LD, 0.34. State density would be 0.67, and then SD would be 1 acre.
And Jackie, you might have, I think you answered this, but I'm not too sure. Where's your staff's recommendations, planning's recommendations on this one currently?
Yeah, so it currently is the Ag 2.5, in large part, again, I think because of the use of the property being agricultural right now. And the urbanizing area has this as conservation residential rural transition,
Mhm.
which a lot of times when we see this area in the comprehensive plan, it is lower density zone, but I do find it interesting that they
Mhm.
sort of carved out, similar to what the current zoning is. It wasn't really, I guess, included as like a future development site. It's almost like a buffering between the two existing residential. So I think under the comprehensive plan, there still could be a discussion of what fits within conservation residential. That new estate density zone that was created, or even suburban density, 1 acre lot sizes. Could argue that that is part of that conservation residential area. Yes.
What happened?
Looking at this is true. Sorry for the feedback.
Probably easier if you just come in here.
Looking at the screen.
Yeah.
Our database of them, looks like a large portion of the area that you're talking about is in the Maple Grove Historic District.
Okay, do you wanna share your screen?
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you,
Oh, thanks.
the voice from above.
thanks. I have the teams up now. Okay, so the area, just to visualize for people, so can you explain the area in blue for me?
Yeah, the light blue is the Maple Grove Historic District.
Light blue is the Maple Grove
There you go.
Historic District.
Yeah.
Outline,
Yeah.
okay, and then the dots are,
The pink dots are contributing historic resources.
See,
That's our property, isn't it? The blue.
These are all just houses that the historic survey
Yeah.
noted in 2015.
okay, so the pink dots are contributing, and the blue dots,
the district.
district.
What about the purple?
Or sorry, you're saying the purple dots, I think you meant the purple dots are contributing.
You can hit the
Contributing
legend right there,
structures.
that will show it to you. The fourth, all the way to the right, the fourth one.
It's Drew's,
Oh, it's Drew's. There's a legend right there, Drew.
thanks. Contributing and non-contributing.
Didn't we have a minor subdivision on one of those, like that
Yeah.
purple dot on the west side? Wasn't there a,
I kind
Yes,
of thought it was a little bigger than just the street. Yeah. Now you're being that big.
So with that consideration, would planning kind of have a different thought process?
we do know about the historic district
Okay.
here. So I don't think there's protections in that
Okay.
designation that would be taken into account no matter what.
Thank you.
so again, over to the west, so say west of that little tab parcel on the north, where you start to get into the more of the wooded area. What does that, I mean, I can see a drainage way going through there from the southeast to the northwest. I can,
Yep.
That helps.
The slope,
yeah, that helps. Yeah, so the slopes really aren't that bad over there.
but there's enough to indicate where the drainage is.
Right.
I think what I would like to see in this area, let's say, taking out the historic area. Let's say you have these large flat lands and nobody wants to farm them anymore. And we're beyond the historic area. I would say it would be really lovely to see something that kept that green canopy, kept the waterways as they are, but then putting some small clusters of denser housing together.
So you're saying like cut it in half? That's kind of where my thoughts were, is like maybe the western part, like larger.
Well,
Lots
or you create a, I could say a PUD, but some sort of way to keep, so that people have green space around them.
No, I agree.
They're not, they might have a neighbor closer than they wanted, but then they've got this huge green area that they can enjoy. And it's so beneficial for mental health and
But would
our
it be
environment.
one parcel that would make,
It'd be like a conservation easement.
okay.
It would be. Of course, that's my druthers, and there's no way to put it into our zoning ordinance, so never mind. I'm just dreaming out loud,
I agree with that.
but, because that's the kind of housing I think attracts people. And you can put some, more affordable housing in there, you can make some larger lots for people who want more space. You can mix, we just don't have anything like that and there's no way to put it.
Knowing that this is from the RDC, would it somewhat be appropriate to allow them to come and talk at our admin meeting about this one? Or do you think that would just kind of expand the conversation to the point where it would be helpful?
Well, I think the RDC's interest is regarding residential TIF,
Right.
and I think we're not gonna talk about that now.
Okay.
I don't think we wanna get into that. That's a can of worms we don't wanna open. I don't think.
Yeah, that's why I was
It's a
wondering what your
whole
thoughts were.
separate. But I do agree that maybe some of this could be zoned small, just not all of it. So I don't know how that works, but.
I don't know how this, I looked at agricultural land, and one thing that you had said about getting the Farm Bureau and then the Small Farmers Association together, I would think that having a community of, like, farmers, honor that land, that agricultural land, and as, you know, rather than develop it all before we squandered what we're gonna need in the future.
Yeah.
To do something that stimulates that kind of, I mean, I hear it on, Earth Eats on
Yeah, yeah.
Saturday morning, all
Yeah.
these young people who are not able to find the space to farm the
Mhm.
land that they'd like to farm, and why couldn't we incentivize something like that?
Why couldn't we make those 5-acre hobby farms?
Right. Why couldn't we make them 5-acre hobby farms, and why couldn't a TIF go for that? You know, I mean,
Well, you know,
Yeah.
something like that, but
There's
why can't we incentivize it?
oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
A 5-acre hobby farm isn't a production farm that feeds people for the needs of the future, would be my suggestion there.
I get your point.
I mean, I just the number of hobby farms at 5 acres or 10 acres it would take to feed the masses that I think that Margaret's talking about.
Feed themselves and a little extra for others.
Or feed themselves and a little extra for others. I mean, that's a good way to phrase it. I just don't know.
I could keep myself out of my 4 containers.
I think the impetus of the RDC wanting us to look at this because they're in hopes of a residential tip
Right.
is really like the elephant in the room that is hard to kind of lump it into what we're supposed to focus on and what they're trying to do. So like, how valuable would this be if there was never going to be a residential tip in the first place? You know, like, I see some value of allowing smaller lots because they're surrounded in, again, it's kind of the hopes of you can sell a smaller lot, which could hopefully be more palatable, obtainable, for folks to buy and build on. But again, I think the catalyst here is the RDC and like, if this is actually going to become a residential TIF or not. And if so, then we should really consider that, because if not, it sounds like there's some, from my observation, it sounds like there is some idea of like trying to turn this into 2 parcels where you can have some more density and then we're still preserving kind of some of that tree canopy and, you know, so that's just kind of my thought, and it seems like a real hard conversation right now to kind of figure out where we fall on, you know.
I think your point is that because the RDC has questioned, has put an opinion forward,
Right.
to
But
listen to
that's
what
not an
they,
idea.
listen to what they have to say seems reasonable, but if we don't want to engage the residential tip into the conversation because it's not anywhere near happening, then, or at least convincing people that it's necessary, then why listen to why they have to say, what they have to say?
Right.
I just keep, you know, after having sat through these last several years, hearing arguments that the market will decide and the market will, you know, in terms of all the housing that's been developed and the kind of the overbuilding that we've done, that the market will determine. Well, I'm ready to wait and see what will the market do. You know, I'm not ready to incentivize more of what we've already overbuilt. If the market is to decide, we can't artificially solve another area of demand, because the theory was everybody wants to live in a multifamily housing unit. And so we overbuilt based on that. Let's see if that works out.
Right, and that's kind of where I'm going with my comment is like, do we wait until this becomes a residential tip to have this conversation? Because, I mean, it's kind of like, are we getting the cart in front of the horse a little bit too much here? But also, I do think that, you know, there is some prime opportunity to, you know, shift to like a suburban density or, you know, something like that, but not the whole parcel. Go ahead, Jerry.
So I don't know what the status of the agricultural use of the property is. I mean, just based on aerials, it looks like it's being somewhat used. But I've recently learned of opportunities from the USDA and the NRCS about agricultural land easements, where it's basically a conservation easement that basically benefits the community or the property owner, can be private landowner, can be a land trust, that kind of encourages the staking of agricultural. And I had not known of that type of.
Yeah, that's really good to know.
conservation. But
Yeah.
There are grant opportunities and stuff like that for private people as well as land trusts, but I don't know if that might be a tactic that we want to consider.
Yeah.
certain aspects in the county, I don't know.
Yeah, and then one of the other things that's related to that is, for organic farmers who struggle when they are located right next to a non-organic farm and they get the runoff, they get the, pollutants, they get all, you know, that they need a buffer, around them. And it would be really nice to be able to create something like that to protect the value of their crop.
Yeah, and, you know, my comments with hobby farms, I don't have a problem with it. You could probably classify what Tammy and I as a hobby farm. Right, but I just think if we're looking at saving agricultural land for mass production of feeding, I don't know that that's the tool. That's my only.
Oh, that's not the point. The point is
Okay,
to save
okay.
it as agricultural land, but to make it affordable for people who are young, who want to get into farming, who want to be sustainable in their lifestyle. That's certainly not production worthy anyway. It's too small.
I would agree with that.
I want to bring up just 2 points. One is, even if we zone in another zone, it won't preclude someone from farming it. They will be able to use it as
Right.
farmland. But it would enable possibility of a different design for bringing forward a subdivision.
Okay, so,
The other point is, I know I brought up 2 examples today about, you know, keeping Ag 2.5. So there's, in the holistic view of the CDO, you know, there are areas where we may, as, you know, as a planning commission, as commissioners, want to preserve farmland in turn for preserving or wanting to make those areas maybe downzoned or preserve as farmland. We're incentivizing or putting other zones in place in other areas that make sense to upzone or create more density. So it's not that, this isn't like a holistic view of what the CDO map does. It's not
Right.
like we're downzoning
Right.
everything.
right,
But I think it's important discussion to say these areas are maybe prime agricultural areas that we don't want to see upzoned to, you know, potentially see like a high residential density here. Or maybe part of this area should stay agricultural and other parts should not. Because we see pressure from all sides and there's, you know, we do have farmland in the county that, you know, is dwindling. And so what's the best use of it is maybe in the eye of the owner, the holder. But we do want to see, you know, if something is downzoned, an equivalent somewhere else in the county could be higher density. So as you kind of think through and see, oh, this is creating more density, why are we proposing it that way in these tables? That's because we're trying to, you know, the comprehensive plan offset some of these preservation areas. We want to preserve this area, but also meet the demands or meet the foreseeable future interests in having different zones and different densities. So I just want to bring that up.
No, those are great points.
So would you all like more information on this one? What can we provide to you? I know we mostly talked about this area. This area over here is a little bit off from that area.
I think I almost forgot we were talking about that
Yeah,
area.
so this area is next to general business and northern part of the PD, North Park.
And can we deal with them
There.
separately, or do we have to look at them as
Road.
a bunch?
No, you could vote each one of these individually.
Okay.
Um,
I'm not saying let's do that, I was just curious,
what? I do think.
because I feel way more comfortable with
General business.
those to the west that, you know, that could probably be okay with increasing the density with really no one even noticing and like I said, half of that parcel I think is fine. Yeah, I just hate to see all of the tree canopy go if we allow higher density across the board. But,
Sure.
I still feel like I would really want to understand if that's ever gonna be a residential TIF and not, like you said, not base our decision off that, but if it becomes one, then we could use that as a factor in our decision, and I would be more inclined to wanna support what they would need to make that successful.
I don't have a problem with that on the east being an RE 2.5.
This area,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, that's my thought on it. I mean, it could support 1 acre home sites, but RE 2.5, it just seems like a very,
Or ag 2.5.
or excuse me, yeah, I'm sorry.
I was trying to figure out what you're.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Ag 2.5, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a real headache, a heartache over that, and I wouldn't base anything on the residential TIF.
This area I will mention is zoned ag OR. Some of these lot sizes are too small for 2.5 acres.
Yeah.
So I do think maybe a discussion about, or if staff can help highlight, this would be non-conforming, so maybe let's take special consideration of these, or maybe because of the lot size in the table, we can point that out later as well, as maybe a discussion point or justification if you want to zone things higher density. I was smarter this time and created this in Excel, so I can send an Excel spreadsheet. Starts getting really long.
I mean, this is one of the latent strengths that we have as a community, that we have these interests in organic and biodynamic farming. And they've been expressed pretty consistently, powerfully, and commercially in our community, but we've never done so much to incentivize it, And I'm thinking of different, Juliet brought up, the threat to especially biodynamic farming when they're neighbored by other properties that use more chemical applications than for insecticides, for example, and then all the insects come to the biodynamic farm. And I've known cases and regions in the world that have transformed what was a heavy industrial chemical farming approach to a completely biodynamic approach, which is further than organic. And it has become a commercial asset for the region as more and more farmers got into it. And I think it was only like a 30-year transformation. But nature is working for the farmers rather than the chemical industry. And but I think that if some approach like that were to be made, it would really have to be spearheaded by a vision and by a charismatic person who is into biodynamic. And Drew, you mentioned some resources that are available for developing something like that. And it sounds like, if we wanted to do something exciting, that is heralds to our vision of who we are as a people and take advantage of some of the latent abilities that we have and interests that we have as a community, this seems to me that we could do it, we could do it with the passion and the drive and the little stimulation and stimulus and the coordination and organization of people who are already doing good things, seems like there's some real possibility there. I just want to mention that.
So would you suggest a zone class? And I'm just asking, are you suggesting a zone classification for that use?
Well, Julie had mentioned that, looking at that property, that ag 2.5, that some buffer, if we were going to incentivize organic farming or hobby farming, for example, then some buffer would have to be made on the borderlines of the property so that the chemicals or the results of chemical applications from other properties wouldn't transfer to the property that is designated for organic or biodynamic, which would be especially exciting because that would also herald to our ethnicity as far as who founded and developed Indiana, be after the Native Americans, that that's really part of our historical heritage. And if we, were to do that, yeah, it would have to be, it would have, you know, I don't know the exact answer to that, but it would take a concerted effort. And, it could be exciting, it could be fun, could be something, it could be something other than, um,
I wonder if there are any other, because the first thing I think of when we talk about that is, are we gonna encumber adjacent properties that we aren't looking at zoning for some sort of, let's just call it a biofarm zone, I don't know what to call it.
Mhm.
Are we gonna encumber adjacent properties with that buffer, or are we looking at properties that are big enough that they can still have their own 200-foot buffer around the periphery, because those are two very different things.
right, and I think that the answer to that two very different thing is if the surrounding properties would cooperate, then the economic vitality of the set aside could be stronger. So usually this convincing of property owners to comply, not be encumbered, has more to do with, person by person interaction and discussion and compliance and discovery and sharing of methods and things like that. You know?
I can check with our legal department on regulation of the spray. I think that I think we've had that correspondence in the past, but I need to refresh my memory, so. I
Yeah,
can-
I'd be curious if is there a model out there for that
Yeah.
type of zone?
Mhm.
That'd be interesting. And if not, maybe we could lead the pack and put our planning department even more on the map.
Yeah, I mean, there'd
will
have to be
say
a lot of
too-
creative thinking. And sorry, I didn't mean, Jim, I just was wondering if I'm getting this right, like, the larger parcel to the east, I guess, if you will, leaving that as a ag 2.5 is kind of what planning has, and it sounds to me, and I might have this wrong, I'm trying to read the room, we're kind of all more like, yeah, that seems pretty appropriate to kind of leave it there as planning is proposing. And so my real question is, if we shift over to the east on the other small ones, is that something that, oh, sorry, to the west, my bad, to those, is that something that we're looking at in a different lens, where like that could be suburban, or what was the other one, medium density? Yeah. And I was just kind of wondering if maybe if people had thoughts on that, because I'm having a hard time of getting a sense of where we're at on that discussion, because it looks like we pared them down into
So there were
different.
Thornton's down over here to
conversations.
the right.
I don't know,
Bloomington,
oh,
Thornton's Welding,
yeah,
is that
that's
Thornton's
right
Welding?
here. Yep, I think you're right.
And then also, you know, I think what planning has is the 2.5 ag designation, but if you look at the breakdown that Jackie had provided, a lot of those are already on smaller lots. So it would almost make some of those parcels conforming. And I'm guessing if we wanted all of those parcels just there, if we separated the conversation a bit or pared it down to this chunk, what would make all of these conforming if we wanted to zone it that way?
Okay.
I must be doing a good job of getting my questions across, because usually I feel really lost and not even sure if they're coming off clearly.
So I think the smallest lot size is 0.52. So you could do a low density residential at 0.34 and capture all of these. We don't have a half acre lot size, we just have 0.34 and then up to 0.67.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Well, I would be in support of that if we could break it into two different.
I just feel like
Focuses.
with the way these lots are already configured, they're so narrow, I just don't know what you do with them.
Well, that's the thing, they're gonna be restrained by the lot itself, so it's not gonna be too much of a,
That weird one in there.
you
Just
know,
keep them
opening a can of
pre-existing
worms.
non-conforming. I don't have a problem with that,
Yeah.
non-conforming.
And sorry to ask you to move back to the east a little bit more again, but so along I-69 there, Some of those are NDOT mitigation properties.
Are they?
Yeah,
What is that?
and, so when they took out massive amounts of trees,
Yeah,
NDOT gave, held some properties as mitigation properties, and as they're coming up, the county's accepting them, and they cannot be
Created a
touched.
dashboard
Oh.
for that.
how
Jackie.
interesting.
It's land that
That's
cannot be touched.
accessible on
How
the
interesting.
Yeah,
GIS
it's
webpage.
basically to mitigate for all the other trees they already took out.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're planting
FYI.
new trees, it just means prevent others from getting cut
Uh-huh.
and land developed.
And not just in Monroe County. You
So,
can,
oh, it's all across the
you can
whole.
mitigate a property in Greene County, for instance, in Monroe.
Yeah,
County.
yeah, yeah,
I
for,
see.
for the damage you did in Monroe County, yeah,
I see, how interesting.
yeah, but it doesn't, it's not like bare land and we're gonna plant trees,
Right.
it's. We're just gonna call this thing, and some of it has to do with the construction project itself, where they had to move a lot of dirt,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't wanna have to. Fix it.
Yeah, they don't wanna reclaim it.
Yeah. So, anyway,
Okay, so that could be something to further illustrate on the.
yeah, it's in that area
Okay,
where you're looking at,
I'll look at that.
so I just wanna make sure that we're good on that.
Yeah,
That might be why it's in that color.
okay.
There's a public accessible dashboard I created for the commissioner's office that shows all of that mitigation area, so just, if anyone else is
I don't have that
interested.
handy.
No, it's, I'll send Jackie a link, but we have a resource for it.
Thank you.
And some additional land has been pre-offered and we submerged and we haven't heard back, so who knows?
So you had these parcels over to the west.
Yeah.
You had those listed as
And
Ag
We're just going
2.5.
on it.
they're currently ag R right now. And then, yeah, I know, I think because it was, this is a request coming by the redevelopment, not these actual
This is-
owners. I'd be curious if they would even support a business zoning here. And,
You mean the redevelopment commission?
no, the actual owners, redevelopment did not talk to these, as far as I know, redevelopment has not has had a conversation with these owners, so. Okay. So it sounds like for this area here, do you want to take vote on one section of it, or do you want to wait?
I think my comments on
569.
on this, right, the eastern section, on that whole block is, I would leave it as it is for now, but I'm concerned about conserving the trees and the, on the western part of this property. So there's gotta be some way to do that, and I don't know what it is.
And when you say leave it as is, you're talking about the proposal that planning's putting forth?
I just leave it as it is in the,
Current zoning?
mm,
Okay. So maybe more.
oh, you guys suggested RE1.
We suggest
No, that is-
ag 2.5.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I would go with. That's what I would go with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would go
And
with.
there's historic stuff. and there's-
Yeah, it's just, there's historic stuff in the east and the west is all tree
Yeah.
canopy and
Yeah.
drainage and stuff. Like, why would you, wouldn't it be nice to have little urban like forests all
Yeah,
around?
That would be
Because
lovely.
we don't do it, no one else
We've
will.
lost a significant
We've
portion
had-
of our tree
We've lost a
canopy.
lot, the tree canopy in this state, in this county.
And
I wonder how
then
much
we
we've
wonder
lost.
why the fire station floods,
Yeah,
you know?
Wonder how much we've lost. Wonder what
It's,
that number is.
I think it's close to,
it's on the city's website, at the forestry.
but that's 2019 data. And we have lost a lot since then.
Yeah. I think one of the areas of the biggest loss, and it's just the aging out of trees, was in that, what is it called, Matlock Heights? That area right across from the stadium, just north of
Yeah,
the
and
football
the
stadium.
Elm Emerald Ash Borer
Yeah,
did a lot of
and then
damage. I
there's
mean,
aging out too.
I've lost 100 trees.
Jeez.
I've lost 100.
So with the limited time we have
Yeah.
left, can I bring up one?
Please, sorry.
thing? That's okay.
But I digress. That should be that'll be on my gravestone, but I digress.
And this may be a longer conversation, but I want to introduce the topic. So we've had correspondence with the health department. They are getting applications from surveyors and others that are not necessarily like building the home, And the reason being is that when we get a minor subdivision or a sliding scale subdivision, we require at the time of application for that minor sliding scale subdivision, 4 lots or less, that they submit a septic permit per lot. The health department is seeing surveyors submit sort of a template design to say, we think the house will go around here, we think the house will have this many bedrooms, but we don't know, here's just like a template. And so when the actual person goes to purchase the lot and wanna build on it, they may be like, oh, the septic was over here under this septic permit, but I'm actually gonna put it over here. So the discussion by the health department was, is there, interest to maybe move towards like a soil survey certification sheet. That's basically like, we've done the soil survey of this area that's going to be subdivided, and there's soil suitable for placing a septic somewhere on this lot. And we have 2 locations shown, but we're not gonna actually issue a permit because we don't know the number of bedrooms and we don't know the exact house.
So in other words, the health department says, yes, here are a couple places on this property where you, this is the health department saying, here are a couple places where you could put the septic, but you still have to come back for a permit. One, yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me, as long as it's less work for you all.
It is less work for the health department, and not necessarily less work for, we just kind of need that information from the health department.
Right.
Say this site can support a septic somewhere, because we've learned that there are some
Right.
instances
then-
where there may not be a septic.
And so so then the resident pays to have that survey done by the study done by the health department, right? It's not really an official soil study. It's just basically saying septic compatible, yes or no.
They would actually submit a soil survey, but they
Okay, it
wouldn't
would
get to
actually
the
be a
point.
soil survey, okay.
They wouldn't actually get to the point of issuing the permit, so I think it would be, a text amendment from our perspective would be, instead of saying must submit a septic permit, it could be something like must submit a soil suitability certification from the health department to say the soils here are suitable to support a septic somewhere on this lot. We create the lot, then they go back to the health department, at which time they actually know the house footprint, the bedrooms.
Right.
And then they put in
So-
the number.
So would, in this interim step, would the health department say, you could put a septic here, here, here? Here's a map, and these colored areas here are where you can put a septic.
That's what the soil survey does.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, okay. So for the resident, they would have to pay for that, right? That would be so there'd be a fee attached, but then there'd be another fee for the septic permit, right?
They already have to
So-
do the soil boring analysis.
I don't understand what
They
you're
do.
saying,
Yeah,
because if,
Well,
because if. and
it just
again,
puts an
I'm
intermediate
going, I'm
step in
going
there.
back, that's what I'm thinking, I'm going back in time, and I've not talked to the health department about this at all.
Oh,
But when you do a 4 lot minor survey, right, you submit
right,
the fees for the
right,
permit.
right.
Well, be patient with me,
Yeah,
okay? 'Cause
yeah,
I'm thinking through
yeah.
this. Julie.
I'm thinking through it. with you.
So you go to the health department, you submit it, and either you meet the sanitarian out there or the soil scientist out on site, or you don't. And they label the site where they think it needs to be. And then the one thing I think,
But not on a map.
well, yeah, on
No,
that,
they're mapped.
Oh, okay.
because they'll submit a latitude and longitude.
Okay, okay.
They just come in all shapes
So
and
the way I
sizes.
see it is, the way it's done now, is you've got and I'm interested in what staff has to say about this, because the way I see it now is you have a site that the soil scientist has tested.
Yeah,
And they said they want a 3-bedroom permit or a 4-bedroom permit or whatever. And it's laid out. If the owner comes back, if Tron decides he's gonna build a house,
A mansion
whatever,
with 20 bedrooms.
and says that, okay, I want it to be a 4-bedroom instead of a 3-bedroom, then they've got to upgrade the system, and then they've got to pay the health department to
right, for
change
another permit.
what the existing permit doesn't.
Right,
have.
no, I understand that.
So I see to now, the way they're doing it is you've got a,
No, that's not my question. I get what you're saying. But my question is, when they pay for the septic permit, they're paying for both at the same time? The soil survey and the actual permit? No, they pay two different things. So the only thing that would be different is how we label it in the text. In our text, when we say they have they have water, they have electricity, and they have compatible soil for septic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, do you have a permit?
Yeah, so
Got it.
what we're running into issues with is the health department relooked at their ordinance and
Yeah.
they're much more strict about applying their
Sure.
languages.
Sure.
And they're basically requiring like a lot of detail and like schematic drawing, what the system's gonna look like, all of these things in order to get the actual permit.
Permit,
Which we
okay.
used to just, they used to just issue those and basically it was like you're suitable.
Yeah,
Your
Yeah.
design will come later, but here's your permit,
okay.
design it later, but now they're saying design it now. We need to have
Got it.
all of the detail, you need to tell us exactly where it's gonna go, now here's your permit.
Right.
What people are running into issues with is when they come to do a subdivision, they just wanna divide the land, they may not have the intention to build for the next 10 years. Because maybe their kid's not old enough, or maybe they're out of state and they don't know if they're coming back, they just want to create the lots and maybe sit on them for a while. So then if they do it the way that they're doing it right now, is they're paying all this money to create this very highly detailed schematic and location for a septic, when they don't know what the
Right.
house is gonna look like, how many bedrooms, all of that. So we're looking for change in the language where we can have just the soil scientists and this, and a survey of the soil system, basically just saying it's suitable. And then there's, that payment has to happen, but then later down the road, if they are actually gonna go for the permit, I don't know what those fees look like for the health
Yeah.
department, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Quick follow-up. So how long do those soil compatibility statements last? Because soil may no longer be compatible in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, because of other things going on. So I
think that would be up to us to put in the ordinance if we
No,
had a
that's up to the
concern.
health department.
So that, in talking with the health department, because I had a similar concern of what if conditions change, they said the most likely change is more like someone drives over the area with a really heavy piece of equipment and compacts it, so then those soils are no longer suitable. So they were more concerned about like heavy equipment driving over it for construction of other.
But there could be a whole shift in erosion and, you know, a new flooding pattern, a new
Right.
floodway, a new this, a new that.
And then you've created a lot that doesn't have the building.
Right.
That's the
Could we
other
not
concern.
just put a lapse on there then where planning requires a new soil testing to be done after a certain period of time?
So their septic permit is only valid for, I think, 2 years.
So
So
what Julia
they'd have
said
to go
was,
through the
what we
process,
need is to change the text, and so I think that that's right. What we do is plain language, say, soil suitability estimate, preliminary estimation, something like that.
Like that.
Yeah.
Soil suitability is, soil septic suitability estimation. Something like that. And
Something that, yeah, we would have to bring an actual
Yeah.
text amendment
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
It's
That
something
makes sense to me,
consider.
total sense. I just feel like I think it needs, I think to say to the health department at this point would be helpful, would be to say, and we need an end date on that suitability study. We need an expiration on it. And that doesn't mean they can't divide their land and do all that, because they may never be able to put septic on it. But that's the risk they take by not building right away. I have no problem issuing a subdivision of land and supporting it if they've got the ability to put septic on it at the time of that incident. But in 10 years, if they go back and they're like, oh, I can't put septic on this land anymore, that's their law. That is their fault, not ours, right? I guess that's what I want to say is, you know,
Just
I
to
guess
clarify,
Go ahead.
so you said within 2 years, if they don't use it, they have to get a new septic permit issue, which
Yes.
renewal, just so that doesn't necessarily mean the soil scientist has to go and perform new.
I don't believe
soil
that they're
number?
required to get a new soil test.
Okay,
I
So-
think before they build, they have to. I think if they're, so I'm thinking of the cases where they come in and they subdivide the land and then 10 years from now.
Right.
I mean, what if they had missed the subdivision by failure to identify properly where the septic could go. You're saving them money by helping them locate where the subdivisions could be. And so you just label it as a septic, a preliminary septic location estimate. And before they build, they have to get a real septic permit. But they should be doing this before they subdivide so that they know, like, they could put all of the soil suitable area could be along this stretch of the land. And they're subdividing it like this rather than like that.
Yeah.
And so let's
Yeah.
help them out.
I think you're identifying great triggers. Well, I haven't remotely, so I think those triggers are already there. Is that if there's like some subdivision or something, those trigger new soil boring analysis to make sure it fits. If we're recognizing a new form, there's no reason we can't put some type of timeline there. So if we feel like 6 months or so, we could build that in our ordinance. We're gonna ask for a new soil boring report to make sure it's suitable. And then I think that will then allow us, that flexibility to move forward with a petition before we get to the site plan to know exactly what they're building and what kind of presby or a septic they need. And fun fact, the first GIS thing I did outside the surveyor's office was work with Jim Bound in the health department to create a way to do
Okay,
soil
so
boring
let me
analysis.
sum up my question then. So, and I see the direction of this. I don't have a problem with it. Other than I'm wondering why, with the success rates of the Presby systems, why the health department is requesting a full design review at the time they file a permit versus at the time they're, because they come out and do an inspection prior to, they come out and do an inspection after the fact to make sure everything was done.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
So I don't understand why that extra step is in there for the
It's for the
permit.
installer. It's actually for the installer to say what elevation they're actually putting in the Presby
Right, but-
system.
I understand that, but I guess again, my question is for them to get a permit says, if you're doing a building permit,
Yeah,
you show on the drawing where the house is gonna be, and that's where the start is, where the driveway is gonna be.
Yeah.
I see where you guys are going with this. I think it's a great idea. I think it can cause a lot of problems to go away. But again, I don't know why the health department's asking for a full design review at the time they issue the permit, because that's not an acceptance.
Government, this is what we do.
Well, it's not an acceptance of it though. That's my
I'm
opinion.
just joking.
Yeah.
Not an acceptance of it.
It's not an acceptance that the system is done and complete and there can be an occupancy.
Right, right.
I don't know why the health department would require,
It's probably state.
They wanna
I
check
would
the,
guess.
well, the state does have a lot of,
but they've got their soil scientist that says it's possible. They've got a map that shows the slopes. And anymore, Presby system has a design that's a standard design. Even a mound system has got basically a standard design, and that's gotta be engineered by
But-
PE.
but what about the elevation?
Well, the elevations on there's a topo map. I think you'd be better off having the topo map and showing the elevations of the contours of the ground to make sure you're less than that 15%. Now, the depths of the integral parts of the Presby, that's part of the specification.
Yeah, that's set, but
So
I'm
if
thinking
it's
with the mound system, that,
Well, the mound system is a system that has to be designed by a PE.
right,
But the Presby, they've got a very rigid,
it's a whole equipment setup where you
They-
have to, it has to be so close to
it
the,
is so
because
rigid.
the pipe comes out of the ground and then right? Yeah,
Right.
I don't have
So,
one.
well, my only
Heard
point
all
is
about
that the health department goes out and inspects it while they're doing the installation to make sure that the depths and everything are adequate.
Right,
I guess I can see the hurdle that you're trying to get through.
okay.
I don't know why the health department is requesting that level of detail at the time they issue a permit.
It could be a
Everything
state.
else is said is possible.
It could be a state statute.
Now,
as
one
far
thing,
as I know.
real quick, one thing in Hendricks County, because I've done subdivisions in Hendricks County, one thing that we've done there is when you identify the septic location, they want it marked off.
Flattened.
They want it marked off.
on the
physically,
ground, on the ground, physically,
So you
like,
don't run into the same problem that,
Yeah.
because that's the biggest problem. It's not farm tractors,
Yeah.
it's concrete trucks, it's graders,
Right.
it's low boys coming
But,
in.
yeah, but I'm
Thinking
also
about the system.
thinking long-term, one of the things that changes is sometimes floodways change, especially with, we're getting
Well,
bigger
they do,
storm
but
amounts.
you're not putting a septic system where there's a potential, I mean, if a
Well,
floodway
that's
is
what I'm-
changing,
Right, that's what I'm saying, is in 10 years, they change, and
Yeah,
so.
that's a low,
we-
low percent,
But,
low.
but if
percent.
you've got something that says you can put a septic in, that's why I'm saying it needs to be rechecked.
Dynamic, okay. So it could be a text amendment that you all would.
It looks like you have
Well,
support if we
okay,
could
all right.
kind
Yes,
of piece it
support.
together.
Yes, support.
I would-
yes, support,
I would
consensus
definitely
support.
integrate,
Well, I'm
survey
curious if-
review board in that and have them maybe look at it in advance to understand.
So I hope that was useful.
how it's
So
gonna
we got off
affect.
on a lot of tangents.
Jackie, if you want, I could take anything to the board to get, the local surveyor's feedback, not that it'll merit any changes, but if there's a resource for you, if that's helpful.
All right, appreciate that. All right, thank you all.
Good
Appreciate
job,
it.
thank you.
Yeah.